So I'll begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands. I'm from Meanjin or Brisbane. I live on, work and play on Turrbal and Yagara country. And so I pay my respects to the elders of these areas, the lands, the waterways, the skies, the seas. I pay my respect to their elders. They have done such heavy lifting in helping us make sure that this framework that we stole from America is in any way culturally responsive for the work that we do in Australian schools. So I acknowledge the work of the elders in terms of them sharing their stories. I acknowledge the work of our Indigenous colleagues and the heavy lifting that you do in your school to make sure that this framework works. So please, I extend my respect to you. So I'm going to talk about, what am I going to talk about in this session? I'm going to talk about functional thinking about behaviour, and I have to offer a few caveats. So here are the caveats. What I'm presenting today is a 101 session on functional thinking about behaviour. So let's use an opportunity to respond. Can you give me a thumbs up if you feel like you know quite a bit about functional thinking about behaviour and you're wondering why I'm presenting and not you? Or you're doing training on this already? Here, if you sort of think you've heard a bit about this topic, you're here and you want to learn a bit more, and here if this is a new space for you. Can you give me a hint? You're all very modest. I'm seeing lots of thumbs this way, and not so many thumbs this way that maybe should be. All right. The presentation that I've put together, I do this presentation with my second year undergraduate primary students. We absolutely teach behaviour at university. So our graduates that are coming out, we would hope, understand this. Probably new space. You know, we have graduated people for many years that didn't know about behaviour. My undergraduate training, I'm a high school trained teacher. Probably guessed from my looks how old I am. Some of you may have been in my generation of teachers. When I went to university, high school trained, in my 4-year program, it was actually 3-year, end of the 3 years, some of you have just aged me. So last of the 3-year, and then I did the 4th year add-on, because we got it because they introduced HEX in our final year. There's a few of you that are here with me. All right, so in all of that time, I remember my behaviour management lecture, single lecture, in 4 years to be a high school teacher, because, you know, behaviour is not a big part of a high school teacher's job. You only need to dedicate one lecture to it. So in the one lecture that we had, I learnt 2 things, and I felt armed, I can tell you, to walk into my classroom with these 2 strategies. You might know these strategies. Do not smile at the children before Easter, and do not be their friend. Who did that training? There are a few of you. Keep your hand up if you did that training in the last 5 years. Oh, makes me so sad. Every time I ask that question, I get that hand up. Every time I ask that question, I get that hand up. We are failing in the pre-service space if we don't teach this. And I love that I'm here with colleagues from other universities who I know are also teaching this. So when you get a perception out there in schools that we're releasing graduates who don't know this information, know that we are fighting hard to keep this space important at the university level. So I'm going to talk about functional thinking about behaviour, and I'm going to use the exact example with you that I use with my undergrad classes. Now, for those of you who put your thumb here or here, this might be a bit low level for you. But what I'm hoping you get from it is I'm assuming in the room we have some coaches. Do we have some coaches? Awesome. So I'm assuming that you're carrying the heavy lifting for the system in doing some training. And if you're doing some training, feel free to rip off every one of these slides and do exactly the same presentation with the staff in your school. And I'm okay with that. All right? When I first learnt about PBL 20 years ago, when I first heard about it, there was this thinking that you only started to think about the function of behaviour at Tier 3. Anyone else got that training? Some of you are nodding, thanks so much. So we had this view that you would do universal practices, not give a second's thought to the function of a student's behaviour. Then if you had groups of students for whom the universal practices weren't working, then you would start to think about what do those groups of kids look like? What do they have in common? What are the sorts of challenges that they're experiencing? And what can we offer to them? And literally for about 10 years, I think the only training we offered was check-in, check-out. Like, oh, if it's not working, give them a check-in, check-out. And to this day, when I go out to schools and I say, what are your Tier 2 interventions in your toolkit? They say check-in, check-out. And if I'm lucky, they might say, we got social skills intervention, or we run a breakfast program. or we have a homework club. And that's about all that people have in their Tier 2 toolkit. And that's not a fault of the schools, that is a product of our training. That's a product of what we offered in the early days. We put the least amount of emphasis on Tier 2. And then we put all of our emphasis on Tier 3. Oh, we'll do a functional behavioural assessment. And there were multiple models of FBA that were being taught across the country. I'm a Prevent, Teach, Reinforce fan. Anyone else in my club? Love it, love it. We've got some PTR people. But there are lots of other functional-based interventions that you could look at, and they're all, many of them have a very good effect size if you use those. I just happen to be a PTR fan because I think it's really understandable for teachers. And it's quite practical. When you look at the information and you work your way through the PTR model, you can grab onto some strategies that perhaps you can implement in your classroom at Tier 1, which I love. So that got us thinking that maybe we've been doing the wrong thing about this functional thinking about behaviour. Maybe we should be introducing it a lot earlier. We should be starting to think about what's driving these kids to behave in ways that don't match all of the work that we've done universally. They're not following our expectations. They're not engaging in learning. They're not responding when we use opportunities to respond. They're the kids that when we're doing active supervision are always the kids that we catch up and notice that they're not behaving on the playground or acting in the eating areas of our school in the ways that we've been teaching. So we get our students to think about Tier 2, which are the groups of children for whom the universals have not been effective, and what should we be doing with that set of learners in addition to what we've already been doing, because it supplements, it's not different to. And so I'm going to share with you what we've been teaching our students at university. Now we know when we think about groups of children in school for whom the universals can be challenging at times, we can get pictures like this, where you can say, oh, well, maybe children who experience anxiety can have difficulty at Tier 2, or maybe children who don't have all of their social skills developed might have trouble at Tier 2. And this image comes from pbisworld.com, which I know Australian teachers use more than US teachers, where the thing comes from. Because I spoke to the guy who made it, and he said, I don't know what's happening in Australia, but you guys are hitting on my website way more than American teachers. So it's got some stuff on there that's very medically oriented and very problem focused. Like, oh, you've got anxiety, so you must need a Tier 2 intervention. So I want to shift away from that and start talking about function of behaviour differently. So I'm going to give you a challenge, and get comfortable with either talking to your neighbour or in your own head. I want you to think about a common problem that primary and secondary teachers tell us, and that is kids are meant to go to the bathroom in break time, and in class, you've probably got occasionally kids who will say, I need to go to the bathroom. I want you to think about every reason you could think as to why they might do that. And then I'm going to share with you all the ones kids tell me. So have a chat. Why would a kid go to the bathroom during a lesson? So here we go. Maybe they get bullied if they go to the toilet in the lunch time, and so they like to go when other kids aren't around. Anyone have that idea? Great. There's going to be lots of these. Maybe there's just too many people there. Maybe they just didn't need to go at the break time. Maybe kids were vaping in the toilets and they didn't want to go in there and get caught. Maybe they don't want other kids to smell their poo, so they just wait till a break. Maybe they needed to fart and they didn't want anyone to hear them. Maybe they don't like the smell or the sound that comes from other people. Maybe their things just weren't working. There were enough toilets that wouldn't flush, or there weren't enough working doors, or there weren't enough menstrual disposal systems. My bowel or bladder just doesn't work on a clock, miss. Maybe they have a health condition. Maybe they've just got a heavy period. Maybe they can't cope with the noise in the bathrooms. Maybe they needed a break from learning. Maybe they wanted to graffiti and not get caught. Are you laughing because you know it's true? Maybe they just went to fill their water bottle, but they're not allowed to do that, so they say they're going to the bathroom. Maybe they went to get something to eat or drink. Maybe they needed to clean their clothes. Maybe they needed to put on deodorant. Some kids like to go to the bathroom to read. Some adults carry that behaviour into adulthood. Maybe they needed to wash their retainer, braces. Maybe they were going to the toilet, they're actually wandering off somewhere else, and asking to go to the toilet covers what they were trying to do. Maybe they were just having a lot of fun at lunchtime. They didn't get round to it. Maybe they were trying to avoid an activity in class. Maybe they wanted to avoid you. They just don't like the teacher. Maybe they wanted to avoid other kids. Let's work in pairs. I gotta go to the bathroom. I can see that happen every time at university. Let's work in groups. Sorry, gotta go. Maybe they wanted to go to the toilet of their preferred gender and not be caught. Maybe it took too long to get from the lunch area to the bathroom, so it wasn't worth their time to give up. Maybe they went off to use their phone. Maybe they just wanted to go and play. Maybe they wanted to meet up with another student. Maybe they wanted to go for a walk. Maybe they wanted to watch what was happening in a different classroom. Maybe they had an accident. Maybe they wanted to just go and engage in some gossip. Sometimes they want to cut their hair. That's not just preppies. Come on, who didn't pierce their ears in a toilet in high school? Maybe they wanted to take a pregnancy test. Not other kids around. Maybe they left early because they wanted to be first in line for the tuck shop. Canteen for you foreigners that don't understand our word tuck shop. A little bit of language translation there. Maybe they had a wedgie. Maybe they wanted to pop a pimple. Some kids like to sing in the bathroom. It's got really good acoustics. They have a wobbly tooth. They have to go and look at it again to see if it's still wobbly. They need to clean their teeth or their braces, separate to retainer. Maybe they just wanted a good cry with no one else around. Maybe they weren't going to the bathroom, they're actually going to steal something. Maybe they wanted to put on makeup. Maybe they wanted to pick their nose. And maybe they needed to pray. These are the reasons so far that kids have told us. I don't think I go again, I don't. These are the reasons so far that kids have told us why they go to the bathroom during lesson time. What did you have that's not on that list? Did anyone have anything else? I ask this question, I always find more things. Was there anything else you had? They were bored. Sorry? They needed a brain break. Bored, brain break, self-harm. Yeah. Punch on. Find a student to punch on. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, there was some shame about what was happening in the classroom. We've had Indigenous kids tell us you were teaching white history. We're not up for that, so we left. Anything else you can think of? Room was too hot, too cold, needed to go and regulate in some way. You see how complex this is? And the default position of a lot of teachers is, you're doing the wrong thing. You're meant to go in your break time. And you can see from all of those reasons, some of that isn't realistic. Like if I'm in class and I've just started my periods and I'm not used to this yet, I don't know the cycle, I don't quite know when things are going to happen, and all of a sudden I'm in class and I'm like, uh-oh. I couldn't pre-plan that. I couldn't at lunchtime think, oh, maybe later today my period might start. Perhaps I should plan ahead, just in case. Like, that's not realistic. And yet the default position of a lot of teachers is that kids are doing the wrong thing when they leave the room to go to the bathroom. So we do an activity like this with our undergrads to get them to think functionally about why a behaviour might happen. This is the starting point. Thinking about the reasons, then we can think about the function. You could take this with any behaviour that's happening in your schools. Why are kids vaping? Why are kids calling out in class? Why are kids using their mobile phone when they shouldn't be? Sometimes it's beyond the teacher's call, because sometimes the school has a rule that leadership have made that talk about you can't let kids out of class to go to the bathroom. In a PBL school, I would sincerely hope we would not have leadership that would have a policy like that. And if we did, I would say our leadership team aren't quite yet bought into functional thinking about behaviour. Because you can see all the reasons why it might be necessary for a kid to go to a bathroom during a break, as we all would do as an adult. Right now, if we thought our period was starting, we'd leave the room and go to the bathroom. And if someone questioned, sorry, why are you leaving? You'd be like, I don't have to explain that to you. And yet if a kid did that, they'd get in so much trouble. And it's super hard to talk about that thing if your school doesn't have a period positivity policy. And also, it's really hard to talk about that if in your family or in your culture, that's private and you don't speak about it. You're not going to say to a teacher, you're not going to say to a male assigned teacher, sorry, my period just started. So you're going to lie. Say, I forgot to go at lunch. So I agree. I agree that there could be a leadership issue, and I'm hoping that's not the case in a PBL school. But take this behaviour out and think about any behaviour that's happening consistently in your school. What's your data telling you? So if you've got kids vaping, think about that. If you've got kids now, because of mobile phone policies, that are sneaking their mobile phone and looking at it, think about why. Just think about why. Brainstorm the reasons why. We spend 3 minutes on that in my class at university. I give students 3 minutes. Come up with all of the reasons why. Think about when you're at school, why did you leave class and go to the bathroom? There are only 2 Christmas dinners post being at high school. So we get them to think about that. You've had 2 Christmas dinners. Think back 2 years ago. You're at high school. Why did you leave class to go to a bathroom? Pick any behaviour and then talk it through. If we can do that, we're at the starting point to think about function of behaviour. And I know that this particular picture is now quite old, but I still love it. I still love it because for me, it's the very basis of thinking about function. What is this kid getting, or what are they avoiding by using this behaviour? What do they gain if they leave the room? What do they avoid if they leave the room? If we think about that, we could cluster all of those answers. We could cluster them. Is this kid getting something or avoiding something? And so I do this activity. I'm not going to do it in its entirety with you, but I do this next. WTF. What's the function? That's what that stands for, isn't it? It does, doesn't it? You think it stands for something different? What's the function? Why do kids do this? If I leave class to go to the bathroom, I could gain some things. I could get attention. I could leave the room and go and see my favourite teacher or someone in their school admin. I could get attention from peers. I could go to a different class where my friends are. I could get something sensory. I could get a movement break. I could get excited because I was so bored in class and now I can make myself some fun. I could get some proprioceptive input. I can go and dance and sing in the bathroom. I can go and play out on the oval. I can spin for a while. I can get some sensory. I could also get something tangible, like I could go and get a glass of water or some food or line up at the canteen and be first in line. I can also avoid some stuff. Let's work in pairs. I'm out of here. Got to go to the bathroom. Avoid my peers. Oh, maths. Avoid this subject. Oh, you. Avoid you. I could avoid some feelings. I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm feeling stressed. I could get out of this room and that feeling will go away. I could also avoid some tangible things. I don't want to do this activity. You just said take out your books. I'm out of here. So if I think about what do the kids get? What do the kids get by vaping? What do they avoid if they go to the bathroom to vape? If we use those sentences and we start to think about the function of that behaviour, we can start to then think about what are the best solutions to this. Because the solution needs to be different depending on what the function is that they're seeking. If we treat every one of those the same, like, all right, you've lost learning time, I'm timing for how long you are in the bathroom, write the time on the board now as you walk out that door. When you get back, I'll get you to write that time again and you will make up that time at lunch, young lady. Kid's gone for 12 minutes, they sit with you for 12 minutes. If the function of that behaviour was adult attention, you just rewarded them because they just got you for another 12 minutes. one-on-one. So tomorrow, I'm going to do that again. I'm going to go to the bathroom in lunchtime in class time, because then I get to spend lunchtime with you. If I'm trying to avoid being bullied on the oval, how can I get kept in? I know we've got a policy that says you can't go to the bathroom during class time. I will go to the bathroom. I don't actually need to go, but I get kept in. And then I'm with a teacher and I can legitimately say, I'm sorry, I couldn't come to that fight on the oval because my horrible teacher kept me in. I found a solution to my problem that's been worrying me. So we can think about the function. What I do with my undergrads is I run that list again, every single one of them. And I say, as we're looking at them, what do you think the student is getting if they do one of these? What could they possibly be avoiding if they do one of these? And we can group them. We can actually take those and put them in groups and say, well, I think that one is about getting peer attention. I think that one is about getting adult attention. I think that one is about avoiding something tangible. So you mentioned a moment ago down the back, and thank you for bringing it up. We sometimes have schools that have policies that state things like students must go to the bathroom during break times, and during class time, no teacher is allowed students to go. And there are a couple of reasons why schools do that. Who works in a rural school? A mate of mine was a principal of a rural school. They didn't let kids go to the bathroom during class time because there were often snakes. And so you could not be certain if the kids went to the bathroom that there wasn't going to be a red belly in there. So they had a rule. They locked the bathrooms during class time because they didn't want kids to go. I've worked in some settings where the school is on a busy road with lots of open access to public. So they don't let the kids go to the bathroom during class time because they could be concerned that there might be random members of the public hovering in the bathrooms. Now, some schools get around that by sending in pairs. We'll just send two of you, you have a look around, one of you stands guard, preppy, you stand guard, and if you see a snake, you'll come back and let us know. Meanwhile, the kid in the bathroom, you're going to have to stay there and deal with the snake, right? But sometimes we do have a reason why we put these policies in place, but other times it's just history. We've always done it this way. That's always been the policy at this school, and we've never really questioned it. And I chose an easy one. I just chose kids leaving class to go to the bathroom. I didn't choose the array of complex behaviours that we deal with as teachers day to day. There are far more complex things that we're dealing with. At the top there, this is a policy that I found on the web, and last time I checked, 2 days ago, that link was working. I'm going to be very sad if they ever take that link down. It's the best example ever of a toilet policy I've found. Like a toilet policy. They actually have a policy on what is allowed in relation to the toilet. And it's a great example of a whole school policy. So if you're working in a school that currently has kids can't go to the bathroom during lesson time, check out that policy and take back this conversation and have it with the teachers in your school. Have it, more importantly, with your leadership team, because your leader is on your PBL team. That's how you're reaching fidelity. Your leader is meant to be on your PBL team. So when they're at your next meeting, you can say, look, this person really challenged us about our policy. And so I got a copy of this policy that she was talking about, and I want to talk about our rule that we have in schools that kids can't go to the bathroom during learning time. Or substitute that with any other thing that we've spoken about today. Like, I'm going to make a big call here. Vaping is a health issue. It's a health issue. When we talk to kids about why they vape for mostly two reasons. What do you think they are? Sorry? I got lots of things. The flavour? Connection. Social connection is the big one. That's the first reason that kids tell us. To be part of my peer group. If I don't do this, I'm the outsider. It's sort of the reverse what happened with cigarette smoking. Maybe those of you who are around my age, cigarette smoking at lunchtime was a thing. And if you didn't do that, if you weren't part of that group, you started to feel a bit ostracised. And so many kids talked about being around kids that smoked at lunchtime simply for peer connection. So we know that's a really big reason why kids vape at the moment. Can you think of the other one? They take it up because they like the smells, but there's actually a reason that sustains it. Avoidance, bit more addiction. Addiction emerges. Anxiety. Anxiety is the biggest reasons kids tell us that they're doing it. They're super anxious. And that regular habit of vaping is a practice that manages their anxiety. That's why I say it's actually a health issue. We've got a group of kids that are super anxious at the moment. They're adopting that practice initially because it's marketed at kids, isn't it? Surely. As adults, we don't necessarily like the smell of fairy floss. That was targeted at teenagers and younger kids. We have primary school kids who are vaping in schools, as you probably know. So that's because the smell is targeted at that age group. But people who sustain the practice are saying that they're doing it because they're anxious. And here's the difference between these two practices that teenagers pick up for mostly the two same reasons, to escape and then using it to address anxiety or for social connection. The big difference that we had that we didn't have previously is if you smoke a cigarette, it has an end time on it. You can only smoke it till it runs out, but a vape doesn't. And mostly, they've got replacements straight up. But there's no satisfaction in going, I've had that cigarette, it's now finished. It's like I've had a vape, there's still more in it. I'll come back in 3 minutes and have another vape because it's still there. So we could talk about what does our data tell us about whatever this behaviour is that you want to talk about functionally. If you want to talk about bathroom use, I've given you an easy one to start with. But if you want to tackle the hard ones, vaping, kids not following teacher directions because there's a broad array of reasons why kids don't do that, kids punching on the oval, whatever your data is telling you is the big issue, take that and have a conversation about the function of that behaviour. Learn about the issue. What does the research tell you about that issue? What's your data telling you? How frequently are kids doing it? Which kids? How many times have you walked into a staff room and you've heard a teacher say, oh my God, the year 9s are out of control? Are they? Are they really? Or is it 5%? Like which kids? In what settings? Under what conditions? With which teachers? In which subjects? And if we look at our data, the year 9s are not out of control. It's very rare that you have an entire year level that's dysregulated. You've probably got a handful of kids, and the same kids are moving from class to class and creating this perception of a big issue. So, what do we know from our families about this problem? I can tell this story because I now work in a different state. But in another state where I worked, and I've worked in multiple, so you won't be able to narrow it down, a student, I'll call them a prep-age student, because if I use the real name, it might give away what state. A prep-age child, so in the first year of schooling, for those of you who are non-prep people, a child in their first year of schooling got suspended from school in the first week. Suspended from school in the first week. This is why I'm passionate about suspension of prep kids. But do you know why they were suspended? They peed in the garden. So a teacher reported that as sexualised behaviour because they saw the kid's penis. So, and other kids saw the penis. And what if parents found out that other kids saw our kid's penis? So it must have been sexualised behaviour because they exposed their penis. They called the family to the school, said there'd been an incident, held the kid in the office, parents come driving in from a fair way away, rural location. They sit down and the principal says, look, we've had a report of some sexualised behaviour. Imagine you as a parent, you'd be like, oh my word, what has my child done in this first week of prep? And they said they peed in the garden. And the mum went, oh my God, that's my fault. And the principal went, what? She said, yeah, we've got a water shortage at the moment, our tank's empty. So I've been telling all the boys to go outside and pee in the garden, and I forgot to tell you not to do that at school. I'm so sorry. Functional behaviour, sexualised? No. Misrule. It's a misrule. The culture at home and the culture at school were different. It might seem odd that we've got to tell kids to go to the toilet in the bathroom, but actually, sometimes we actually have to teach that behaviour. And so if you do this with your staff, it does start to get people thinking in this way about, is there something else going on? Is there a reason why this child might be doing this behaviour that isn't about them trying to annoy me? Because sometimes that's what they think, this kid's just bugging me. This kid's just doing it for control. I know you haven't ever heard that sentence from any teacher ever. They're just trying to control this classroom. Potentially, they may need a sense of control in their life because maybe things are dysregulated elsewhere. But could there be other reasons as well? Let's talk through those. So that's how I would normally do it. So back to the bathroom issue. I'm going to stay on it and take you all the way through the end of the example so that you can then substitute it out and strip in what you need. We can then look at, could they be doing it for attention? Could they be doing it for a tangible reason? Could they be doing it for a sensory reason? And if they're doing it for one of those, what could be actions that we might take to address that issue? So let's say a whole group of kids told us, I go to the toilet during class time because there is a lot of bullying that's happening in the bathrooms and you haven't known about that as staff, then obviously your response would be to increase supervision in and around the bathroom spaces. If that's what kids are telling you, this is the unsafe space in our school, adult supervision, active supervision in those locations is going to address that problem. And then that'll reduce the number of kids needing to go to the bathroom during lesson time because bathrooms become safer at lunch breaks. If they tell you that the reason that they're doing it is because it takes too long to get from the oval to the bathroom and I don't want to give up precious playtime, well, maybe we need a transition schedule where we offer 2 bells, one that says, this is the end of your playtime, start making your way to get ready for learning, and now this is your time to be lined up and ready for learning. If that's what it is, if kids don't have time, we can create time in our calendars. If it's sensory, maybe the toilets stink. We might have to up the cleaning of these. We might have to put something in there to address the smells. If we've got kids vaping in there, maybe one of the things we need is better extraction fans as a starting point to get the smells out of the bathroom. And then also look at why kids are vaping. And then do the functional conversation around that as well. Because if they're only doing it at the moment because they like the smell, we need to change that quick because otherwise it becomes an addiction. And I've got 19, 20, 21-year-olds that I work with all the time that are completely addicted right now to vaping. And I have a long-term health issue to think about how am I going to get them to stop this. And if anyone's got any strategies, I'm out of luck. I've got nothing at the moment. So if you've got strategies to help kids with long-term vaping issues that are really addicted, I'll take any and all advice because I'm struggling with one person in particular. We also might need to teach about the problem. So again, I'm staying on the bathroom theme, but replace it whatever you need. We might need to introduce some stories. Like if you're too embarrassed to go to the bathroom and fart, everybody poops. Everybody does it. So let's talk about that and normalise the behaviour. If you don't know about your periods and you're struggling with that, then maybe we need to do some period management. And maybe some kids need some targeted interventions around that. I've worked with lots of kids with disability. I've had kids whip tampons out in the middle of the classroom and wave them around over their heads, trying to teach where is appropriate behaviour. Come on, who are my special school people? Yeah, you're with me, you get it. I'm not talking about behaviour you haven't seen already. So if we've got a kid who doesn't quite understand that yet, we need to really teach that fast, because if they graduate from our school and they go out in public and do that, there's going to be a whole other level of response that's going to happen to that behaviour. So we have it as a teaching opportunity in schools. So then we think about what curriculum do we need. We have general capabilities, personal and social responsibility. We can start to think about how we teach those. And in our special schools, we probably have to scale that. We have to do tier 1 intervention explicitly. Whereas in a mainstream school, potentially, I don't have to talk to my year 9s about taking tampons out in the middle of classrooms. Or I might. If we're an inclusive setting, all are welcome. And then we might want to think about this thing that has no evidence that sits behind it. Have I shocked you? Because it's a core feature of PBL that we have something called a behaviour response continuum, or you might call it your flowchart, or you might call it your minors majors. What are your other names for this thing? Any other names for it? Who uses behaviour response continuum? Welcome to the researchers in the room. Who calls it their flowchart? And who calls it their minors majors? Any other names? Great, so if I use that, I'm going to talk about this one in the keynote this afternoon. If I use this term, I've got most people in the room. I'm going to show you this afternoon what I think we need to do with that, because I think we need to burn it. I think, oh, I know, whoa, I just stepped into controversy. I don't think we got it right. Who thinks we got that right? Who thinks this works? Depends on how it's made. We've had an evolution of it, and I'm going to show you where it started, where we're at, and where we need to go. Because I think this is actually causing us problems. So come to the keynote, it'll be fun. All right, and then we might need to think about, do we need a tier 2 intervention? If we've done our universals, so we can think functionally about behaviour at a universal level. Because I'm sure in every school there are common challenges around students and their behaviour. Kids not doing homework, kids not turning up at class on time, kids not coming to class with the materials that they need, kids talking out of turn. These are just consistent, common behavioural mistakes that we see in every school. So we can address those universally. We can just assume. I can assume if I say in my university lecture, we're going to work in groups, I can assume that 15% of my class are not going to engage in that activity. Because the research would suggest that's typical. There's going to be some kids who will want to leave, and there's going to be some kids that are going to sit in the group and go, I'll be the note taker. That way I don't have to talk. That's me, by the way, in every group I'm ever put in. Let me take the notes. And then I don't have to talk. I love that in my role. So there'll be kids immediately that we know, whatever we do, we can address universally, but there are some kids who will need some targeted support. So thinking about this bathroom idea, we may have some kids who need a tier 2 intervention. So we might have to think about, well, what behaviours is this child using when they're facing a challenging situation? And if it's consistent that they're leaving the room and running off to the bathroom, the actual problem is the challenging interaction that we need to think about. Every time I say, take out your books, I leave. Every time I say, year 4s, we're going to read aloud, I'm going to call on people to read aloud. I've got some kids who all of a sudden need to go to the bathroom. Year 4s, I'm going to get you to do some quick number facts, and then I'm going to call people out to solve them on the board, out the door. So the challenging interaction is the issue, and we might need to think about a tier 2 intervention. Maybe this kid needs academic support. Maybe this kid needs social skills interactions. Maybe I, as the teacher, need to define the roles of what I want people to do in the groups and rotate them so that Shiralee doesn't, for her whole life, become the note taker in a group. Maybe I need to think about which of these behaviours is most problematic, because as Brandy suggested this morning, it would be so nice if we had tier 3 kids, but we don't have tier 3 kids. We have kids in our classroom, and depending on what we're doing with them, some of them might need tiered supports. And they might not need tiered supports in every area. Wouldn't it be great if they were just everything? Oh, you're the kid that needs help with everything. That's going to make my life easier. Instead, oh, this group of kids need help with science. This group of kids need help with reading. This group of kids have challenges around following instructions. So we might have to think about, well, which behaviour right now is the thing that we need to work on? Because we can only do so much as teachers. What impact is that having on their functioning in the classroom? So how is it playing out? I see teachers buy into behaviours that's having no impact on kids in the classroom. And the biggest one that I see all the time is kids who use any sort of stimming. Why are we addressing that? I'm looking around the room and I see people stimming in here, and I haven't told any of you to stop that. There's people twirling their hair, there's people sitting with their legs crossed, and when their legs crossed, their foot is tapping up and down. There's people sitting with their feet flat on the ground, but their knees are bouncing. There's people sitting there and they're twirling things around, they're twirling things around their neck, or they're twirling things in their hand, or they're chewing their nails. They're all stimming behaviours. That's you going, she is so boring and I wish this could finish. Or, I've been sitting for a long time and I really need to keep my body moving so that I'm regulated. You're just doing them quietly. As kids learn how to stim in ways that are socially appropriate, which we try and train out of them, which is a real shame, but as they do that, they learn to do behaviours that don't draw attention to them. If you've got a kid tapping a ruler on the table or clicking their pen up and down, that kid's stimming. That's okay. That's just them going, this is really interesting. I'm trying hard to stay with you. I'm trying hard to stay focused. And then they get punished for tapping their ruler. That kid could have disengaged and walked out of the room. They're giving it their best shot to be with you and stay with you. So you might want to talk about, well, how could other kids show that sort of behaviour in this situation? Do they have that skill in their repertoire? These are the sorts of questions that we could ask before we hit a tier 2 intervention. Because it's easy just to go, these kids don't fit our norm of our classroom rules. This is where PBL's done badly. We create a matrix. It's actually a guise for our old school discipline. So it looks like this. We go, what are all the things that kids do that really annoy us? Calling out in class. We can't write don't call out in class, so we'll put your hand up to ask questions, and that's how you show respect. So now we have a matrix that looks like we're a PBL school, tick, fidelity, but actually we punish then all of the old behaviours that we didn't want to see. And there's some schools that implement PBL like that, but I know it's not yours. So, I jest. With 2 minutes to go, I want to offer you a space to go and read a little bit more about Tier 2. We have some amazing people in the PBL community across Australia who all came together, and I get credit for this, but I don't deserve it. They wrote a fantastic book. All I did was edit it. There's loads of great stuff in there about PBL and specifically about Tier 2. Missouri, if you haven't followed the Missouri website, if you haven't heard of it before today, get onto that website. We have stolen their resources for, we've been 20 years in Australia, they've been 30 years in the US. They're a bit older than us, but they have got some great states that are doing great work, and Missouri is one that we often point to. And then pbis.org, the home of all things PBL. All things PBL. So if you're not onto that website, there's a place to go. Great resources available to you. And COI Education, I don't often promote an individual paid training provider. I don't often promote them. The people from COI do good training. They're expensive, but they do good training. What I love about them is they do make their resources available for free. And they wrote a couple of books that are quite handy. So if you're not onto COI Education, jump onto their website, look at their resources section. They've got templates and materials that are worth downloading. I'm not on their pay books. When I notice good things, I try to promote them. So we have 1 minute to go. Thank you for coming. I'm sure some of you just stayed because you were too tired to leave after Doc Fox, and I appreciate you staying. Can I answer any final questions before we head off and have a beautiful lunch together?